Holy shit. He said what?
Oh, I was there, hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did. And I travelled the world with him, and I did really enjoy working with him. But, you know, now I really don't care if I ever see him again, because the way he's behaved towards the king and our queen and his brother and his sister-in-law is appalling.
Forget every fairy tale picture you've ever seen plastered on TV screens. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's royal wedding wasn't the magical celebration people thought they were witnessing. No, it was nothing but a staged circus, crafted down to the tiniest detail for the cameras and glossy headlines. Sure, there were glittering carriages, breathtaking music, and those cinematic guest shots that made people swoon. But all of that? It was pure performance. What looked like a modern fairy tale was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. And the truth? It was far uglier than anyone dared imagine.
He delivered it like an actress delivered it, and Oprah responded going, wow.
Behind the curtain, things were an absolute mess. Arthur Edwards, the royal photographer who's seen it all, finally spilled that what the world thought was a royal love story was actually chaos wrapped in designer gowns. Imagine this. Senior royals, people who had given decades of loyal service to the crown, being shoved into back rows like nobodies. Meanwhile, Hollywood friends of Meghan, people who had no connection to the monarchy, were handed front row seats as if it were some kind of exclusive red carpet premiere. Guests were left baking alive in the brutal sun, sweating through coats and gowns, desperately trying not to faint. Dignity, respect, tradition, nowhere in sight.
All my life, you know, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And, you know, I thought to myself, it's all showbiz.
And it wasn't just the guests who felt the sting. The press, the very machine that made this spectacle possible, was treated like dirt. Harry, instead of embracing the cameras like every royal groom before him, deliberately ducked, twisted, and turned away at every chance. Photographers scrambled, trying to capture something, anything usable. Arthur Edwards even admitted with sheer disbelief that he couldn't get one decent photograph from the entire day. Imagine that. A royal wedding where the man behind the camera couldn't even do his job. It was the first and only royal wedding of its kind, and not for a good reason.
He was angry, and I felt we were punished for that. In fact, I never got one picture in the paper published from that day.
And Meghan, she didn't walk into that chapel as a bride entering a family. She strutted in like a brand unveiling. This wasn't about love or unity. It was a carefully staged launch party. The event looked polished on TV, sure. Flags waving, choirs soaring, celebrities glowing. It looked like magic. Millions at home thought they were watching history, a real royal romance unfolding live. But for the people trapped inside Windsor, the reality was suffocating. The atmosphere was misery wrapped in gold ribbon. Guests sat for hours in blinding heat, sweat dripping, makeup melting, tempers flaring. Women clutched fans like lifelines, praying to survive until it was over. This wasn't romance, it was survival. And Arthur Edwards, the man who has worked more royal engagements than anyone alive, didn't hold back. He called it the worst royal event he had ever endured.
There, hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did.
Think about that. He had survived decades of monumental royal occasions, from the fairy tale of Charles and Diana to the grace of William and Kate. Yet nothing compared to this disaster. And here's the catch. It wasn't the weather. Royals have stood proudly through rain, storms, and blistering heat before. No, what made this wedding unbearable was the sheer lack of care. It wasn't about the guests. It wasn't about family, it was all about the cameras. Attendees' comfort didn't matter. The only priority was making sure the world watching on TV saw flawless images, smiles, glamour, perfection. Behind those camera-ready grins, exhaustion, frustration, and a suffocating sense that no one mattered except for Meghan's moment.
Harry was determined to keep the newspapers away from it as much as possible. Everything was done on long lenses. I mean, I tell you, I had an 800mm lens photographing the guests arrived.
So, was it a fairy tale for the millions glued to their TVs? Maybe. But for those forced to endure it live, it was torture disguised as tradition. And the seating plan, oh, don't even get started on that. What should have been a symbol of respect turned into outright humiliation. Decades of loyalty, service, and family bonds counted for nothing. Senior royals, decorated veterans, even family members who had carried the monarchy on their shoulders were treated like extras. Who got the spotlight instead? Meghan's Hollywood pals and industry names, most of whom had barely met the couple. They strutted into prime seats ready for their close-ups. It wasn't about blood or family family legacy anymore. It was about which face looked best on camera when the lens zoomed in. The monarchy in that moment was pushed aside. The Meghan show had begun.
Photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away, you know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster.
Arthur Edwards, the man who had faithfully captured every major royal moment for decades, couldn't believe what he was seeing, or rather, what he wasn't seeing. His seat was so far back and his view so blocked that he joked he needed a GPS just to find it. Imagine that. After years of service to the crown, he was reduced to background noise, shoved into obscurity while Hollywood strangers basked in the front rows. Whispers rippled through the pews, guests muttered under their breath, horrified at what they were witnessing. "This isn't a wedding," some said. "It's a networking stunt." Windsor Castle, the ancient fortress of royal legacy, suddenly felt like a set borrowed for a glitzy awards show. The message was loud and clear. Tradition was out, and star power was in. Loyalty meant nothing. Legacy meant nothing. It was all about the show. And if anyone thought the reception would finally redeem this humiliating spectacle, they were dead wrong.
I think I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding. I did Andrew's wedding. I did Sophie and Edward. You know, I mean, they were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough, I promise you that.
The worst royal wedding to cover.
Yeah.
A royal wedding reception is supposed to scream grandeur. Long banquet tables groaning under roasted meats, champagne fountains, and desserts so extravagant they dominate front pages the next day. But what did Meghan and Harry serve? Finger food, tiny canapes, little slivers of avocado toast, and macarons so small a child would still be hungry. Guests who had spent thousands on couture gowns and tailored suits were left nibbling like birds. The monarchy, which once prided itself on tradition and generosity, was reduced to crumbs. Literally.
I felt so. I felt it wasn't just me, it was the whole of the British press. You know, they were in many ways badly treated. I think it was, Harry was angry with us really because some of the things that had been said about Meghan, and quite rightly, some of the things that were said about Meghan during the engagement were pretty hard.
And if that wasn't enough, Harry himself turned the wedding into a vendetta. Every royal before him, his father, his brother, even his late mother, understood that embracing the press was part of the duty. Smiling for the cameras wasn't vanity, it was tradition. But Harry? He glared, he dodged, he made photographers' lives a living nightmare. Arthur Edwards described it like dealing with a sulking celebrity throwing a tantrum. Instead of regal elegance, he gave them scowls and deliberate blocks. Every moment that should have been immortalized with dignity was sabotaged. Not a single respectable photo emerged. Think about that. After photographing Charles, Diana, William, and Kate effortlessly, Arthur was left empty-handed at Harry's wedding. It was deliberate, it was petty, and it was an insult.
I have to say though, you know, that first year of Meghan, working with her on the road, you know, we went all over the country. She was incredible. I mean, I thought she was a great asset to the family.
Because this wasn't an accident. It was Harry's chosen punishment. He held the media personally responsible for Meghan's rough treatment in the press, and instead of rising above, he turned his own wedding into a weapon. The result? A day that should have radiated joy became poisoned with bitterness. This wasn't a man carrying the weight of royal duty. This was a man consumed with grudges. Instead of history, guests got hostility. Instead of unity, they got division. Harry made it clear this wasn't about blending into centuries of tradition. It was about breaking free and burning everything in the process.
I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles would be seething. It would be so unfair.
And oh, the ceremony itself. Arthur saw right through it. From the sermon that sounded more like a Hollywood monologue than a sacred blessing, to the Americanized performances shoehorned into the event, everything screamed, "Look at us," rather than honor the crown. This wasn't William and Kate's graceful balance of modern love and tradition. It wasn't Charles and Diana's fairy tale fantasy. This was Meghan and Harry declaring war, drawing a line in the sand for everyone to see.
Pictures of Archie that was taken by the Press Association. I mean, showing her on my phone, and she sort of, and that was the first time she saw him. You know, so it was difficult times.
What should have been remembered as a royal celebration turned into something else entirely, a bold declaration of independence, and not the graceful kind. Meghan and Harry weren't quietly forging a new path. They were mocking the very institution that paid for their grand stage. They didn't just step away from tradition, they set it on fire. Arthur Edwards didn't mince words, he called it heartbreaking. Imagine it. An entire generation of royal children growing up without bonds, without cousins, without the traditions that defined the monarchy for centuries. The loss wasn't just emotional, it was generational. And the hypocrisy? It was bitter. Meghan and Harry never missed a chance to preach about the importance of compassion, family, and unity, privacy, yet when it came to their own, they drew the line. Privacy, Arthur observed, wasn't really about protection. It was a shield, an excuse to keep the royals out while selling their truth to the highest bidder. The wedding didn't unite families. It fractured them beyond repair. Every cold shoulder, every refusal, every snub, it all chipped away at the chance of reconciliation. What began as a glittering ceremony ended as a campaign of estrangement. To the royals, it felt like betrayal masked as independence. To the children, it was simply loss. And just when the dust seemed to settle, Meghan and Harry returned for an encore, the Oprah interview. If the wedding was the opening act, this was the grand explosion. They sat down not to heal wounds, but to reopen them. They dropped accusations like bombs, claims of racism, cruelty, neglect, painting themselves as martyrs in a one-sided story. Arthur Edwards saw it for exactly what it was. Not honesty, not reconciliation, but a stunt. A performance staged to keep the spotlight squarely on them. And the timing? It was everything. When sympathy for Meghan and Harry was fading, when their star power was at risk of dimming, they unleashed a scandal so explosive it dominated headlines for weeks. Millions tuned in, expecting heartfelt confessions. What they got was a rehearsed script designed to embarrass the monarchy and elevate Team Sussex as eternal victims. The fallout was devastating. Families torn further apart, trust shattered, centuries of royal dignity dragged into Oprah's garden for the world's entertainment. But for Meghan and Harry, none of that mattered. The chaos guaranteed coverage, and coverage meant relevance. What viewers thought was a confession was really a business transaction. Pain was their currency. Scandal was their profit. And so, Arthur Edwards summed up the legacy of that infamous wedding. Not as a love story, not as unity, but as the spark that ignited a circus. Behind the polished cameras, guests baked in suffocating heat. Loyal royals were shoved aside while celebrities strutted in their place. Food was laughably meager, photographers were punished, and the entire day felt less like history and more like a PR stunt. So here we are, vendors still unpaid, fans still waiting for refunds, Netflix quietly stepping away, the royal family slamming the door shut, staffers sharpening their knives, and a marriage that looks more like a battlefield than a love story. What started as a fairy tale is ending as a cautionary tale. And unless some miracle swoops in to save them, Meghan and Harry's empire isn't just wobbling, it's collapsing. And maybe, just maybe, this is the ending they wrote for themselves, not by accident, but by arrogance.